The look on his face when I laid out the authentication certificates was priceless. One moment, he was the respected dealer laughing at how he'd swindled me out of $50,000 for a fake collectible. The next, he was watching his entire reputation collapse in front of everyone at the auction. Karma doesn't always come quickly, but when it does, it's beautiful to watch. 6 months earlier, I stood in my apartment, staring at the savings account balance on my laptop screen. 52,347.89 tone. Nearly a decade of overtime shifts, passed up vacations, and living below my means, all for this moment. The Helix Chrono wasn't just a watch. It was the cornerstone piece for any serious collector. Only 100 were ever made, each numbered and certified. I'd researched it for years, knew every detail, every marking. The soft afternoon light filtered through my blinds as I closed the laptop with a satisfied click. That evening, I walked into Vantage Collectibles for the first time. The shop had the perfect reputation: exclusive inventory, discerning clientele, and Maxwell Reed, the owner, was considered the authority on luxury timepieces in 3 states. The store smelled of leather and polish. Display cases gleamed under perfect lighting, each item presented like a museum piece. "First time at Vantage?" The voice came from behind the main counter. Maxwell Reed himself. I recognized him from the industry magazines. Mid-50s, immaculately dressed, with the kind of confidence that comes from decades at the top of your field. "Yes," I admitted, suddenly feeling underdressed in my business casual. "I've been saving for something specific." "Let me guess." His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "A Patek? Audemars?" "Actually, I'm looking for a Helix Chrono." Something flickered across his face, so quickly I almost missed it. Interest, surprise. He recovered instantly, his expression smoothing into practiced professionalism. "You have exceptional taste." He gestured toward a private consultation room. "Those rarely come to market. Follow me." The consultation room was intimate. Just a polished table, 2 chairs, and subtle lighting designed to make precious metals gleam. Maxwell excused himself and returned minutes later carrying a leather presentation box. "You're in remarkable luck," he said, placing the box between us. "I acquired this piece from a private estate last month, number 37 of the original 100. My heart raced as he opened the box. There it was, the distinctive curved case, the complex dial with 3 subdials, the signature crown. The Helix Chrono. My hands actually trembled as I reached for it. "Careful," Maxwell cautioned, his tone friendly but firm. "The value is currently at $48,500, but these appreciate reliably. The provenance is impeccable." I turned the watch over, examining the caseback with its engraved serial number. Everything looked right, felt right. The weight, the finishing, the details I'd memorized from countless photographs and articles. "Does it come with the original documentation?" I asked. "Of course." Maxwell produced a certificate of authenticity, warranty card, and original sales receipt. "Everything's in order?" I spent nearly an hour examining every aspect of the watch, comparing it mentally against everything I'd learned. Maxwell was patient, answering my questions with the easy authority of an expert. By the time I left with a promise to return in 2 days with the funds, I was convinced I'd found my grail piece. The morning I was scheduled to make the purchase, I woke up with an inexplicable uneasiness. Maybe it was the size of the transaction. I'd never spent so much money at once. Maybe it was how quickly I'd found the watch after years of searching. Whatever it was, I decided one final check couldn't hurt. I called Chronometry, the specialty repair shop across town that was authorized to service Helix timepieces. They couldn't authenticate without seeing the watch in person, but the technician gave me additional details to verify. Specific movement finishing patterns, the exact placement of hallmarks, the weight tolerance. Armed with this information, I returned to Vantage Collectibles that afternoon. Maxwell greeted me like an old friend, ushering me back to the consultation room where the Helix waited in its presentation box. "You've brought the certified funds?" he asked, his eyes flickering to the envelope in my hand. "Yes, but I'd like one more look before we complete the sale." Of course. His smile remained fixed, but something tightened around his eyes. I examined the watch again, this time checking the specific details the technician had mentioned. The crown action felt slightly off. The hallmark on the movement was positioned differently than described, and when I weighed it in my palm, it felt lighter than the 157 grams it should have been. "Is something wrong?" Maxwell's voice had an edge now. "I'm not sure," I said carefully. "A few details seem inconsistent with what I've researched." His expression shifted, hardened. "Research is one thing. Experience is another. I've handled dozens of these over my career." "Would you mind if I took it to Chronometry for verification before purchasing?" The change was immediate. His friendly demeanor vanished, replaced by cold irritation. That won't be necessary. My authentication is sufficient. If you don't trust my expertise, perhaps this piece isn't for you. I'm prepared to buy today, I countered. I just want confirmation. Absolutely not. These pieces are too valuable to be carried around town for unnecessary second opinions. He closed the presentation box with a snap. I have other interested buyers. That was the first real warning sign. Any legitimate dealer would welcome authentication. I should have walked away then, but the watch had been my obsession for so long. I convinced myself I was being overly cautious. I apologize, I said. You're right. Your reputation speaks for itself. His smile returned, though it didn't reach his eyes. Wise decision. You won't regret it. I handed over the envelope containing the cashier's check. Maxwell verified the amount, then pushed the presentation box toward me. Congratulations, you've joined an exclusive club. That night, I couldn't sleep. The watch sat on my nightstand, and in the dim light, certain details bothered me more and more. The finishing wasn't quite as refined as it should be. The loom didn't glow with the right intensity. By morning, I knew I'd made a terrible mistake. I took the watch directly to Chronometria when they opened. The master watchmaker needed less than 5 minutes. I'm sorry, he said, looking genuinely pained. This is a sophisticated replica, but it's definitely not authentic. The movement is a modified ETA, not the in-house caliber it should be. The case metals aren't correct either. My stomach dropped. You're certain? Unfortunately, yes. I've serviced at least 20 genuine examples. This isn't one of them. I returned to Vantage Collectibles immediately, the fake watch in its box and the authentication report from Chronometry in hand. Maxwell wasn't there. His assistant, a young woman with a practiced smile, informed me he was at a private showing and wouldn't return until the following day. I need to speak with him urgently about the Helix Chrono I purchased yesterday. Her smile faltered. Is there a problem? Yes. It's been confirmed as counterfeit by an authorized service center. The color drained from her face. Mr. Reed handles all authentication personally. You'll need to speak with him directly. I returned the next day, and the day after. Each time, Maxwell was unavailable, in meetings, at an auction, sourcing inventory. His assistant became increasingly uncomfortable with my visits, finally admitting that he'd instructed her to tell me he was working on resolving my concern and would contact me directly. A week passed with no contact. My calls went unanswered, my emails unreturned. I researched consumer protection laws, contacted the State Attorney General's office, and filed a police report for fraud. The process was frustrating, wheels turning too slowly when nearly my entire life savings was at stake. Then came the industry newsletter in my inbox. Maxwell Reed was hosting the quarterly collectors auction at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel. The event was invitation only, attended by serious collectors and dealers from across the country. I wasn't invited, of course, but the newsletter detailed the preview cocktail reception that would precede the auction. I decided to attend, not to confront him. That would accomplish nothing in a room full of his peers and admirers, but to gather information. Perhaps I could find others who'd had similar experiences. At minimum, I could document his presence and activities for my legal complaint. The Grand Metropolitan's ballroom was transformed for the event. Display cases showcased the auction lots, watches, coins, rare books, and art pieces. Waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. The attendees were clearly wealthy, bespoke suits, designer dresses, casual discussions of 5- and 6-figure purchases. I spotted Maxwell holding court near the main display, surrounded by admirers. He looked completely at ease, gesturing expressively as he spoke. I kept my distance, circulating through the room, examining the auction lots, while keeping him in my peripheral vision. 2 hours into the event, I overheard a conversation that changed everything. In a quiet corner, a middle-aged man was speaking intently to a younger collector. Just be careful with Reed, the older man was saying. His authentication process isn't as rigorous as he claims. You're saying he knowingly sells fakes? The younger man looked shocked. Not exactly. Let's call it willful negligence. He doesn't verify as thoroughly as he should when the profit margin is attractive enough. I introduced myself, explained my situation with the Helix Chrono. The older man, Thomas Hargrove, wasn't surprised. You're not the first, he said quietly. Reed has a pattern. He targets enthusiastic new collectors who have money, but not enough experience to spot sophisticated replicas. Why hasn't anyone stopped him? Most victims are too embarrassed to come forward. Others he silences with partial refunds and NDAs. The few who persist find themselves facing his army of lawyers and industry connections. Hargrove gave me his card. He was a retired authentication expert who'd worked with major auction houses. I've been collecting evidence for years, but I need people willing to go on record. Over the next month, I worked with Hargrove, connecting with 5 other collectors who'd purchased counterfeit items from Maxwell. We compiled documentation, authentication reports, communication records. One victim had even recorded a phone call where Maxwell had laughed about amateurs paying tuition in the collecting world. But the real breakthrough came when Hargrove introduced me to someone from Helix's parent company. They maintained a confidential database of all authentic pieces by serial number. The watch Maxwell sold me had a real serial number, but it belonged to a piece currently in a private collection in Singapore. He'd copied the number from a legitimate watch and applied it to my counterfeit. With this evidence, we approached the Consumer Protection Division of the State Attorney General's office. They were interested, but warned us the process would be lengthy. Maxwell had powerful connections and a sterling public reputation. "We need something more immediate," Hargrove said after our meeting. "Something public that he can't ignore or bury." That's when I learned about the annual authentication panel at the upcoming International Collectors Convention. Maxwell was scheduled to be a featured expert, discussing how to identify counterfeit luxury items. The irony was almost painful. I spent the next 3 months preparing. I took courses in authentication, consulted with experts, and documented every aspect of my fake Helix chrono. I compared it side by side with authenticated examples. I traced the history of the real number 37, confirming its location in Singapore. I even had the metal composition of my fake analysed by a laboratory. The day of the convention arrived. The authentication panel was scheduled for the main hall, with seating for 500 attendees. Maxwell and 4 other experts would each present for 20 minutes, followed by a Q&A session. I arrived early, taking a seat near to the front. Maxwell didn't notice me. Why would he? I was just one face in a crowd of collectors. He took the stage with the confidence of someone who'd never been challenged, delivering a polished presentation on spotting counterfeit watches. The audience was rapt as he detailed the telltale signs of fakes, the importance of provenance, the value of expert authentication. "The most dangerous counterfeits," he explained, displaying slides of comparison pieces, "are those made with attention to detail. They might fool the enthusiastic amateur, but they can't deceive the trained eye." When the Q&A began, I waited for several other questions before raising my hand. The moderator pointed to me, and a staff member brought a microphone. "Mr. Reed, you emphasized the importance of serial number verification in authentication. Could you explain how collectors should approach this process?" He didn't recognize me. Why would he? I was just another face, another collector seeking wisdom. "Excellent question," he replied smoothly. "Serial numbers should be cross-referenced with manufacturer records when possible. For pieces like the Helix Chrono, where only 100 exist, this is particularly crucial. And if a dealer sells a Helix Chrono with a serial number that belongs to a watch currently in Singapore?" His expression flickered, the briefest moment of confusion. "That would clearly indicate a counterfeit," he answered, recovering quickly. "Though such a sophisticated fraud would be rare. Not as rare as you might think." I stood, pulling the Helix Chrono from my pocket. "This is watch number 37, which you sold to me 6 months ago for $48,500. The room went silent. Maxwell stared, recognition finally dawning. "According to Helix's records," I continued, my voice steady despite my pounding heart, "the authentic watch number 37 has been in a private collection in Singapore since 2018. It has never been in your inventory." The moderator started to intervene, but I pressed on. "I have documentation proving this watch is counterfeit." I held up a folder. "Laboratory analysis of the metals, authentication reports from 3 independent experts, and confirmation from Helix that the serial number is duplicated." Maxwell's face had gone pale. "This isn't the appropriate forum. I also have statements from 5 other collectors who purchased counterfeit items from you, and a recorded phone call where you laugh about new collectors paying tuition for their inexperience." Murmurs spread through the audience. The other panelists looked uncomfortable. "These are baseless accusations," Maxwell snapped, but his composure was cracking. "This person is attempting to damage my reputation with fabricated claims." Thomas Hargrove stood from his seat several rows back. "The claims aren't fabricated, Maxwell. I've verified them personally." The weight of Hargrove's reputation in the industry was significant. More murmurs. Louder now. "We have a representative from Helix here today," I added, gesturing to a woman in the 3rd row who nodded confirmation. "She's prepared to verify that watch number 37 has never passed through your hands." The moderator finally regained control. "Perhaps we should take a brief recess." "No need," I interrupted, placing the counterfeit watch and my documentation on the edge of the stage. "The Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division has everything they need, as do the industry certification boards." I walked out as the room erupted in conversation. Maxwell's voice rose above the din, demanding order, claiming conspiracy, but the damage was done. His carefully constructed facade had cracked in front of the exact audience he couldn't afford to lose: his peers, his clients, his industry. The aftermath unfolded faster than I expected. By that evening, social media and collector forums were buzzing with the confrontation. Video clips circulated. Other victims came forward. The convention organisers issued a statement distancing themselves from Maxwell pending investigation. Within a week, the state licensing board suspended his dealer credentials. Major auction houses announced they would re-examine all pieces acquired through Vantage Collectibles. Former clients initiated a class action lawsuit. The industry publication that had once featured him prominently now ran an expose on authentication fraud. Maxwell attempted damage control, press releases claiming misunderstanding, offers to make things right with any dissatisfied clients, accusations that competitors were orchestrating his downfall. But the evidence was too substantial, the pattern too clear. 3 months later, I received a check for the full amount I'd paid, plus interest and damages, as part of a settlement agreement with the state's Consumer Protection Action. Maxwell didn't admit wrongdoing. His lawyers wouldn't allow that. But he couldn't fight the combined weight of evidence and public opinion. Vantage Collectibles closed permanently. The inventory was sold at auction to satisfy creditors and legal judgments. Maxwell's certification credentials were revoked. The man who had built his reputation on authenticity was himself exposed as a fraud. As for me, I remained in the collecting world, but with hard-earned wisdom. I purchased an authentic Helix chrono the following year, number 63 fully verified by the manufacturer and 3 independent experts. It sits in my collection not just as a beautiful timepiece, but as a reminder. The fake Helix. I kept that too, in its original presentation box, with Maxwell's certificate of authenticity. Not displayed with my collection, but stored in my safe. Sometimes when I'm considering a significant purchase, I take it out and look at it, a permanent reminder that expertise can be counterfeited as easily as objects, and that trust must always be verified. The watch industry has a saying, buy the seller, then the watch. I'd add my own corollary, but verify both, because appearances can be perfectly polished lies. The most valuable thing I gained wasn't the financial settlement or even the authentic watch I eventually acquired. It was the confidence that comes from standing up against someone who thought you were too insignificant to matter. Maxwell had counted on my embarrassment and isolation. He never expected me to turn his greatest strength, his public reputation, into his ultimate vulnerability. Sometimes I think about that moment on stage, when recognition dawned in his eyes and he realized who I was. Not just another face in the crowd, but the collector he dismissed as another easy mark. The collector who returned with receipts, evidence, and the perfect public stage for accountability. In the end, the fake watch taught me more than the real one ever could.